There's a lot of excitement surrounding Oleksandr Usyk following his fantastic performance on the weekend against Anthony Joshua. Many people were mesmerized and shocked by what they saw in the ring. As such, some of you may take what I'm about to say about Usyk later on in this video the wrong way, because you maybe are new subscribers, you haven't been watching my videos for a long time, or maybe you just haven't been watching my videos on a regular basis. And this is important because I have been extremely complimentary of Oleksandr Usyk for many years on this channel. I've been singing his praises. I've been telling everybody time and time again that this guy is going to be an absolute nightmare for the big heavyweights and that he's going to beat at least one of the top three, if not more. After Usyk beat Chaz Witherspoon and later on Derek Chisora, a lot of people were coming back to me in the comment section of my videos and saying, do you still think that Usyk could beat any of the top heavyweights, the big guys, the AJs, the Wilders, the Furies, after how poor he looked against Chaz Witherspoon or how poor he looked against Deontay Wilder? And my answer always was an emphatic yes. But I've also said over many years now, at least, 5-6 years, that I do not expect this era of heavyweight boxing to have a monolithic champion who reigns supreme over the division. I think this is going to be far more similar to the 1990s or the 1970s, where the heavyweight titles are changing hands on a fairly regular basis. I said all along, back when Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury, and Deontay Wilder were all still undefeated, obviously Fury's still undefeated, but when AJ and Wilder were still undefeated, I was saying in my videos that none of these guys are going to run roughshod over the heavyweight division. It's going to be a round robin type situation. And I still feel that way now. After all these years of saying this, I'm still saying it now after Usyk has just dethroned Joshua. Oleksandr Usyk, as fantastic a fighter as he is, as dangerous as he always was in my mind for the big heavyweights, I don't expect him to reign supreme and go on to beat everybody. Now, I'm just going to play you a couple of clips from two of my old videos. I recorded the first video about 2 years ago. It's still on my channel. And in that video, I was talking about how dangerous Oleksandr Usyk and Michael Hunter are going to be for the big boys in the heavyweight division, such as AJ, Fury, and Wilder. And the second clip is from my Usyk Chisora post-fight video, where I was talking about how impressed I was by Usyk's performance, despite the fact that many other people weren't impressed. I was doubling down on my assertion that Usyk is going to be a massive problem for the likes of AJ, Fury, and Wilder, even after that performance. Because I understood, well, let me not talk too much. I'll let the videos explain themselves. Again, the first video was recorded and uploaded. It's still on my channel over 2 years ago. The second video was from last year. So have a listen, and I'll see you on the other side.
I'm starting to suspect that Oleksandr Usyk and a former opponent of his, Michael Hunter, are going to turn over several of the big names in the heavyweight division over the next few years. When it comes to Usyk, when he fought in the World Series of Boxing against Joe Joyce, he lit Joe Joyce up like a Christmas tree. I think Usyk might be able to do something similar to a lot of heavyweights out there in the pros. I think that he gives Tyson Fury, Deontay Wilder, Andy Ruiz, and Anthony Joshua all they can handle and then some. Isn't Joshua a bit too clunky to be able to deal with Usyk's movement? Is Deontay Wilder a bit too one-dimensional to be able to deal with Usyk's all-round game? You know, Deontay Wilder is a guy who likes a stationary target. Look at all the problems that Artur Szpilka gave Deontay Wilder. Artur Szpilka is not like a poor man's Usyk. Szpilka is like a homeless man's Usyk. And I'm telling you people, Szpilka gave Deontay Wilder lots of issues in that fight. Many people believed Szpilka was ahead at the point where the KO occurred. Of course, the judges didn't have it that way, but what do you expect there? Who would be the most difficult for Usyk out of those guys? I suspect it might be, maybe Fury might be the most, but I still see Usyk giving Fury fits. I've spoken in a video before about how I think the way to beat Tyson Fury, or one of the ways to beat him, is actually not to go forward at him, but to move away and get Tyson Fury to come to you. That's how Tyson Fury got himself in trouble against Steve Cunningham, because he had a smaller guy with quicker feet and quick hands with good range who actually forced Tyson Fury to come looking for him. And if you put Tyson Fury in that situation, I'm telling you now, I'm predicting that he's going to struggle again. So I think Usyk has the potential to knock off several of the top names. I'm not expecting Michael Hunter or Oleksandr Usyk to go on and dominate the division. That's not what I'm expecting. But I am expecting between the two of them that they upset several of the big names out there. Because they're small guys in an era of giants, maybe he fights a Takam and struggles, and then one of the top heavyweights says, yeah, okay, I'll take on Usyk. And then all of a sudden, that guy's not a pressure fighter, and they're dealing with an Usyk who's moving all over the place, and they can't handle it. And it's going to shock and surprise a lot of fans out there.
No surprises here. Oleksandr Usyk comprehensively outpoints Derek Chisora over 12 rounds. Well, I say no surprises. I was a little taken aback by the fact that Derek Chisora thinks he won the fight, and also the fact that there are a lot of fans out there, boxing fans, who thought that it was very close and also thought that Oleksandr Usyk didn't perform well. What performance did people expect from Usyk? Personally, I got exactly what I expected. There was no surprises. The pattern of the fight is what I expected. And the result, of course, I picked Usyk to win a decision. Derek Chisora was able to rough him up early on in the fight because Derek Chisora went all out as a pressure fighter. The Anthony Joshuas, the Tyson Furies, and the Dylan Whites of the world are not going to do that. You do realize this, don't you? They're not going to just go flat out trying to attack Oleksandr Usyk. They're going to try and box with him a little bit. And Derek Chisora coming forward is a more difficult target when he's rushing at you with his head down than someone like an AJ or a Dylan White who stand up taller, even a Tyson Fury to some extent. He can't get low the way Chisora got low and rush forward. So understand that styles make fights. And this particular style, Derek Chisora, was always going to result in that kind of fight with Oleksandr Usyk. What was he supposed to do? Knock Chisora out in 2 rounds? I'm just baffled at what people expect against a guy like Chisora, who is swinging for the hills at every opportunity, who's rushing forward. You're going to catch the occasional shot, especially if you're only 6'3", like Oleksandr Usyk. He's not a 6'7" Wilder or 6'8" Fury or 6'6" Josh. He's not that tall. So he's not going to be able to keep as much distance between himself and Chisora as Tyson Fury was. So you have to have realistic expectations. I didn't see anything in this fight which made me want to change my view on how well I think Usyk would do against the big heavyweights. I didn't see anything that remotely would make me change my view. I think that Usyk is going to give most, if not all, of the big heavyweights all types of problems. I'm not saying that he'll necessarily beat them all, but I think he can at least beat one of them, maybe 2 of them. Most heavyweights, including Tyson Fury, in the 9th, 10th, 11th round of a fight, how many of them are moving the way Usyk is moving? No one in the heavyweight division can move like this guy late on and be reeling off combinations on the move, and he's a southpaw. So I was impressed. Those of you who are disappointed with Usyk's performance, what on earth did you expect? I'm baffled. He wasn't a knockout artist at cruiserweight, so surely you didn't expect him to be a knockout artist at heavyweight. Chisora is a very tough man. He's a huge man compared to Usyk, 250 odd pounds. So there can be no ambiguity about how highly I rate Oleksandr Usyk and Michael Hunter, and how highly I've rated them for several years now. It's not something recent. It's not something reactionary after the AJ fight. No. I've been saying this for years, okay? However, I understand that styles make fights. This is absolutely crucial for any boxing fan to wrap their head around. Derek Chisora, as I explained in those old clips, does certain things that AJ, Fury, and Wilder don't do. Certain things which gave Oleksandr Usyk problems. Now, Usyk does certain things that give Wilder, Fury, and AJ, in my view, problems. We've already seen it against AJ. I think we're going to see him give Wilder and Fury all types of problems if he fights either of those guys as well. But there are going to be certain heavyweights who Usyk actually struggles with. There are going to be certain guys who either just bulldoze him the way that Chisora tried to, but managed to do it successfully, not necessarily wiping him out in a few rounds, but just bullying him to the point where he can't get into his boxing properly. The guy's just on him so relentlessly, he's not giving him the time and space to get his shots off the way he likes to. So there may be a guy he comes across who does that to him. There may also be somebody who outslicks him. And people are going to be saying, what? That's impossible. There's nobody that can outslick Oleksandr Usyk. Well, I can think of possibly one. And Usyk has fought him before. That would be Michael Hunter. The Usyk-Hunter fight is still up on YouTube. Go watch it. In that fight, you are going to see Michael Hunter outbox Oleksandr Usyk for stretches in that fight. Now, ultimately, Hunter, who tends to start fast, faded in that fight, partly due to the fact that he starts too fast and expends a lot of energy, but also, of course, because of Usyk's pressure in his own skills. So he did fade, and Usyk ended up winning the fight fairly comfortably. I think the scorecards were far too wide, like 117, 111 or something like that for Usyk. That's far too wide. But he definitely won the fight by at least, I want to say, 3-4 rounds. But there were moments there where it looked dodgy for Usyk because Hunter was so slick. Okay, so if they were to rematch at heavyweight, I expect another tricky night's work for Oleksandr Usyk, and perhaps Michael Hunter has learned from their first fight. Perhaps he'll be better if they were to have a rematch. Now, in the 12th round of their first fight, Michael Hunter was very fortunate to not get stopped by the referee because he was in all sorts of trouble. And I've spoken in previous videos about how Michael Hunter needs to learn to pace himself better. As I've already said, he tends to start very fast, and he did against Usyk. Usyk was looking a little red-faced, a little flustered by what Michael Hunter was doing in there in outboxing him and being very slick and crafty. And Hunter claims that making the cruiserweight limit actually drained him. You know, he's spoken about the Usyk fight and says that if they were to have a rematch at heavyweight, it would be different because he would have more energy. That might be partly true, but again, Hunter has a habit of not pacing himself very well. Now, against Kuzmin, he paced himself well, but in other fights, such as the one against Alexander Povetkin, he did not. He went out there early, tried to bum rush Povetkin, tried to knock him out, didn't manage to get it done, and then through the mid and late rounds, he was struggling in terms of stamina. He was looking sloppy, he lost his shape. If Michael Hunter can learn to pace himself, then that's a guy who could potentially be a problem for Oleksandr Usyk in the future. For my money, Michael Hunter was the most difficult opponent for Usyk other than Briedis. I would say Briedis did the best against Usyk. I thought that was a very close fight. And at the time when I first saw it, I thought Briedis had won. So I would say Briedis did best against Usyk, then Hunter, then I guess you'd have to say Derek Chisora. Not that that fight in my mind was particularly close, but Chisora made it physically rough, and he did win some rounds, particularly early in the fight. I was always intrigued by the Carlos Takam fight because that was supposed to happen a while ago. It was supposed to be Takam who faced Usyk in his first heavyweight bout, but it kept getting postponed. I think Usyk was injured, and then eventually it ended up being Chaz Witherspoon. I think that's how it went. Or maybe it was the Takam fight. Maybe they were supposed to fight Takam after Witherspoon, or perhaps it was both. Perhaps they tried to arrange it before and after. I forget now. But that was always intriguing to me. Again, big, strong guy like Chisora, not as wild as Chisora, but perhaps even more relentless when he wants to be, and a bit better technically, throws a few more punches. That intrigued me. I always felt like Usyk would win, but I felt like that's a rough fight against a real big, strong, tough man who's going to be relentless and keep coming at you. I don't know how viable Takam would be now because he is in his 40s, and look, he wasn't a spring chicken when they were talking about him fighting Usyk a while ago, but still, he's even older now. So I don't know, if he was to fight Usyk in a year or two, Takam's probably going to be too old. Usyk himself is, 34? So age is something we also have to look at with this guy. Bear in mind that with the bigger heavyweights, when they start getting up there in age, when their reflexes are no longer quite as fast, they can rely on staying behind the jab and just keeping people at arm's length. They don't have to exert themselves as much. They don't have to use as much energy either in the ring or in training as a smaller guy does, like Usyk, who relies so much on movement. The more you move, the more energy you're using. And the older you get, the less energy you tend to have. Now, I'm not talking about somebody who was never in shape up until the age of 35 and then suddenly they turned it all around and picked up a healthy diet and got a six-pack abs and now they've got more energy than they've had all their life. I'm not talking about that. We're talking about people who have always been in shape, like Usyk. He's not going to be as energetic at 40 as he is now, okay? And so there comes a time, again, boxing, at the highest level in particular, is about tiny margins of error. A few centimeters can make the difference between getting knocked out and not getting knocked out, or can make the difference between you landing a punch and you missing a punch or your punch being blocked. Split second timing. This is how finite it is. And so there may come a point where Usyk is just a little off the pace in terms of his speed and reflexes, where he can't quite throw as many punches as he used to, can't quite move the way he used to. And then all of a sudden it's going to be, wow, he looks small in there. These big guys are managing to catch him and they're hurting him. That kind of thing. You see? And that time might not be too far away. If Usyk's 34 now, by the time he's 36, are we going to see some noticeable slowdown? It's possible. When you're in there fighting these big boys, particularly if they're coming at you like Chisora, and I'm sure that many heavyweights who face Usyk now, big guys, are going to try and rush him. They're going to dispense with any notion of trying to box with him because they are going to see what happened to Anthony Joshua and say, I don't want that to happen to me. They're going to rush him like Chisora did and try and do a better job at that. And therefore, even if Usyk is managing to beat these guys who rush at him like that and rough him up, you can pick up injuries. It puts wear and tear on your body, not just fighting them in the ring, but also in sparring. When you're having to prepare for somebody that's going to rush at you, you got sparring partners rushing at you, roughing you up. When you look at movers in the heavyweight division, Muhammad Ali being a perfect example. When he was young, nobody could handle his movement. He was able to move around the ring for 10, 12, 15 rounds. But as he got older into his 30s, started getting a little heavier. Yeah, he could move for a couple rounds early in the fight, but after, 3, 4, legs were slowing down, was becoming more stationary, ended up on the ropes, and he had to learn a lot of other skills or develop a lot of other skills and adapt his style in order to still get the victories. And of course, he took losses along the way. The old adage in boxing is that the legs are the first to go. That's what they say. The legs are the first to go and the power is the last to go. When are Oleksandr Usyk's legs going to go? They look great at the moment, but how long will they continue looking great for? And what if he comes across somebody who is going to commit to body punching more so than AJ did? AJ tried to throw a few body shots late in the fight, very clumsy looking shots, and he ended up being countered. But there are going to be guys who prepare themselves better to launch a concerted body attack against Usyk. How will Usyk's legs hold up in such a situation? Bear in mind, you're talking about big heavyweights going to his body, not cruiserweights. And by the way, I think the best course of action for Anthony Joshua in the Usyk rematch, if he takes this immediate rematch, is just to go hell for leather, is to launch himself at Oleksandr Usyk, similar to how he launched himself at Dillian Whyte. You remember in the first round against Dillian Whyte? He just came out all guns blazing. I think that's Anthony Joshua's best chance of winning in a rematch. Now, there are other strategies that a guy of AJ's dimensions and athleticism could use to potentially beat Oleksandr Usyk. But I don't think AJ has enough time between now and whenever the immediate rematch is going to be to develop the technique necessary to implement those other strategies. He would need to change trainer, and in my estimation, he would need to have several learning fights where he's transitioning to these new styles, these new techniques, before he could then go in against Usyk and try and implement those other strategies. In the short time frame that he has, whatever it's going to be, 4 months, 6 months, he's not going to be able to do that. Therefore, again, in my estimation, his best bet is to go out there from the opening bell and just stick it on Usyk, try and be as rough as possible, bully him, and hope to take him out. Or just hope to knock him out of his stride sufficiently that he can pick up rounds along the way. And bear in mind that if AJ does do that, his chances of being knocked out himself are going to increase exponentially. We know that Usyk can hurt him. We saw it in the first fight. And if AJ is rushing in, Usyk has fantastic footwork. He can step to the side. When AJ misses, he can counter him with clean shots. So it's a risky strategy, but I feel like his chances would be better if he takes that risk in terms of winning, but his chances of getting knocked out are also going to increase. It's one of those ones. It's a gamble. Anyway, main point in the video is Usyk is fantastic. I've been saying for years, this guy's a problem for anybody at heavyweight, but I'm not expecting him to reign supreme. I'm expecting this guy's reign to not be a Klitschko type reign or a Mike Tyson in the mid-1980s type reign. No, I don't think so. I think the round-robin, chaotic nature, the unpredictability is going to continue for some time yet. And Tyson Fury, by the way, is the smartest guy out of all the big heavyweights, not just in the ring in terms of his boxing brain, but even out the ring in terms of who he fights and when he fights them, which fighters to avoid at certain times and which fighters to take at certain times. That's not to say that Tyson Fury is scared of anyone. He's just strategic. He's a businessman. I've mentioned it many times before. The way he manages his career is very similar to Floyd Mayweather. I know he's with MTK and all this kind of thing, but Fury obviously has a say in who he fights and when he fights them. And he's very, very good at picking the right fights at the right time. When he looks at Usyk, do you think that he is chomping at the bit to fight Usyk right away? I suspect he might even go for an AJ fight. Let's say AJ doesn't fight Usyk next, or AJ fights Usyk next, gets beat again. I wouldn't be shocked if Tyson Fury targeted AJ first before he went in there with Usyk. That's assuming that Tyson Fury beats Wilder in the rematch, because Wilder still has that crazy power. He's been working with Malik Scott, and perhaps he'll be more prepared for Tyson Fury coming at him, because he was completely shocked by Tyson Fury's tactics in that second fight, as I was, as most people were. Whereas now he knows what Tyson Fury's capable of. Maybe he'll be planning. Maybe Malik Scott will be getting him prepared for several different possibilities as far as Tyson Fury's strategy. So Deontay Wilder winning the trilogy fight is not out of the question. Anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comments below about everything I've talked about in this video. Come and join me on Patreon and access my weekly no-holds-barred, censorship-free podcast where we lift the lid on a wide range of controversial topics. It's not mainstream friendly, it's not politically correct, but that's the whole point. We dare to stand as a beacon of reason against an army of insanity. Just head on over to my Patreon page and select the tier called Hatman Hot Topics. You'll gain access to a minimum of 2 hours of exclusive content every single week, including podcasts, videos, interviews, live stream Q&A sessions, as well as my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. Not to mention a vast back catalog of hundreds of hours of previous episodes. You can listen via the Patreon app with the option to download in high quality MP3. We've also got a Discord server where you can come and chat and hang out with myself and other members. There's no contract, no commitment, and you can cancel at any time. So come and join our community of free and critical thinkers by signing up with me here on Patreon today.